Good morning, everyone. So today we're going to be looking at the endocrine system. We're starting our next section. And we know that the endocrine system is one of the two systems that the body uses to communicate with itself. So we're going to say that it works in conjunction with the nervous system to maintain what is known as, we've talked about this phrase before, homeostasis, this term. And we know that homeostasis means internal balance, maintaining constant internal environment despite of what's going on with the outside. Okay, the endocrine system is one of those systems that, again, just like the nervous system, can have access to every cell in the body, and it is a slower reaction, but it has prolonged effects. And the nervous system, on the other hand, it is quicker to get started, but it'll have effects that are sort of shorter lasting. Okay, so why does it take longer? So it takes longer for the endocrine system because it works using chemicals. As we will see, these chemicals are called hormones. And these hormones are secreted by glands into the bloodstream. So here is what we can see is we have these secretory cells. So these are the cells in glands right here. And these cells are secreting the hormones, and the hormones through diffusion are making their way to the bloodstream. And then the bloodstream will carry these hormones around until we get to what are known as target cells. Whatever cell it is that I want to affect as a hormone, that's my target cell. So you can see it has to travel through the entire bloodstream to get to the area that it is required. Okay. Now, when it comes to hormones, hormones comes from the Greek, which means to set in motion. So we see that these hormones are chemicals that get things going. They sort of cause some sort of an effect. But really what they are is they're messengers. They're proteins. So they're messengers. They have specific effects on target cells, tissues, or organs. Depending on what it is that their function is. Okay, there are two different types of glands. So we talked about hormones being released by glands. Not every gland will secrete hormones. We have two kinds. We have exocrine glands and endocrine glands. And when it comes to exocrine glands, these are glands that secrete fluids outside of the body, to the outside of the body. So they secrete substances using ducts. Ducts are like little tubes, right? So they're using ducts to the outside. So for example, sweat glands. They secrete sweat. Salivary glands. So salivary glands, they have the salivary ducts that are going to release saliva, and it's to the inside, but it's outside of that particular gland. So they sort of, they secrete substances to the outside of the gland. And so the salivary glands, the tear glands, obviously produce tears. So these are using these little ducts, these little tubes. As you can see here, the secretory cells that are endocrine, these are endocrine cells, they secrete hormones directly from that gland into the bloodstream. So not to the outside like exocrine. So endocrine is the one that we are going to be worrying about. So the endocrine is the important one. And so these guys, they secrete hormones specifically, not substances. The only substance that endocrine glands secrete are these protein messengers called hormones. So they secrete hormones into the bloodstream. Okay, so directly into the bloodstream, that's where we're going to get exocrine glands, and we're gonna star that because those are the ones we're gonna worry about. Now, when it comes to hormones, hormones also have their own classification, just like glands did. And when it comes to hormones, what we're going to see is that we have tropic and non-tropic. Now, tropic hormones, these guys right here, what they do is they have an effect on other glands. So tropic hormones are sort of part of a pathway where gland A affects gland B, gland B affects gland C, and then eventually maybe gland C has the direct effect on an organ or a cell. So it's sort of a middleman kind of an idea. So a tropic hormone has an effect on another gland, okay? So I'm gonna say here, they are part of a pathway that includes multiple glands until eventually it reaches a target organ or a target cell. Okay, I'm just gonna put cell, and cells make tissues and tissues make organs, right? So that's what we're going to write on there. So it's part of a pathway. Whereas non-tropic hormones, these ones have a direct effect on a target cell. And I'll give you an example for both of these. So for example, for a tropic hormone, I can use, and we'll talk about these in detail, so don't worry about. So TSH stands for thyroid stimulating hormone. So it is a hormone that is secreted by the pituitary gland, which is right in the brain. We saw that just underneath that hypothalamus. And you have the pituitary gland that is secreting TSH, and TSH has an effect on the thyroid gland to secrete its own hormone. So this gland sends a message to this gland, and then this gland is going to secrete its own hormone. So you can see hormones are messengers. Anytime that I want something to happen, I need to send, it's almost like a little flying pigeon with a little message tucked in, right? So I need the thyroid to secrete its hormone. How do I tell it? The pituitary is going to send TSH to the pituitary, so that the pituitary is going to send a message to the thyroid so that the thyroid knows to secrete the hormones that it needs to secrete, okay? Whereas a non-tropic hormone, an example here is HGH, human growth hormone. Another hormone secreted by the pituitary, but this one has a direct effect. It affects the bones and the muscles in your body, so directly affecting cells, and it tells those cells to undergo mitosis. So it tells them to grow and divide. So when you're growing, when you're going through your growth spurts, your pituitary is secreting HGH, your bones and your muscles are dividing and growing, and that's how you have your growth spurt. Direct effect, okay? Hormones, again, they are messengers, so we have to control their function. So they're not going to be on all the time. Sometimes they're on, sometimes they're off. Sometimes they're going to be on for a period of time, and then another hormone is going to kick in and sort of turn them off. So we're going to look at this sort of hormone regulation. So what we have first is I have antagonistic hormones. So if you remember, antagonistic is a word that we used in Bio 20 when we were talking about muscles. And you have, for example, the bicep and tricep are two antagonistic muscles. When one is contracted, the other is relaxed, and vice versa. So these guys are antagonistic. They work against each other. Okay, so they do the opposite. They have the opposite effect. So in a way, they work in sync because they have to sort of, it's either one or the other that is present. So we can say that they do work in sync with each other. And regulate processes by having either one hormone present or the other. Okay, so they have opposing effect. And that's how they regulate processes. And again, I'm going to give you an example here. Probably the easiest example of antagonistic hormones that you can think of is insulin and glucagon. So both of these hormones are secreted by your pancreas. We're going to talk about those in detail in just a little bit. But insulin, what insulin does is after you've had a meal, your pancreas releases insulin, and the insulin takes the blood sugar that you have circulating and stores it away. So after you've used up all of the sugar that you need to power your cells, your muscles, and everything, insulin takes that sugar and tucks it away just in case it's needed. And then let's say that, 3 o'clock comes around and you finished your lunch a while ago and you're kind of feeling a little sluggish. You don't have too much sugar circulating in your blood because you've eaten a while ago. Then glucagon kicks in, and glucagon takes that sugar that has been stored away and puts it back in your bloodstream so that your cells can now do some function. And that's when you get your second wind. So the second wind that you get is from the glucagon that has been released in your body. Okay, so those two work opposing one another. One decreases blood sugar, insulin. The other one increases blood sugar, glucagon. And so in your body, at any given time, you either have insulin or glucagon. Those ones never shut off. If you have an excess of sugar, insulin kicks in. If you have a deficit of sugar, then glucagon kicks in. So you either have one or the other coming in at any time. Positive feedback, this is when you have the presence of a hormone stimulates or increases the production of another hormone. And this one, I can give you an example, but we're not going to do this until later when we get to reproduction. And so the presence of FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, causes estrogen to be made. Okay, so it causes estrogen to be released from your ovaries. So follicle stimulating hormone is a hormone that comes again from your pituitary gland. And what it does is it tells the ovaries that you're ready to ovulate, to have an egg released and to be fertilized. And so in order for the uterus to get ready to then accept that fertilized egg, estrogen is needed. And so FSH is released, and that message is then sent down to the ovaries, and the ovaries are going to send that message. Then they're going to release estrogen, which is going to have an effect on the uterus. Okay, so those are all sort of examples of positive feedback. There's going to be lots, as we will see, in the reproductive system. So when we get to that, we'll get in there. But again, the presence of one hormone causes a different hormone to either be produced or to increase its production. The one that we're going to focus particularly in the endocrine system is going to be negative feedback. So when it comes to negative feedback, again, I'm going to use a different color here just to make sure. So when it comes to negative feedback here, the presence of a hormone or the end result, what we were trying to figure out, what we were trying to fix. Remember that the hypothalamus is the one that is receiving the message. It is the complaint box. Something is happening in the body that needs to be dealt with. And so let's say that a hormone is released and we've now dealt with the problem. So we've reached the end result. So the presence of a hormone or the reaching of the end result that we wanted shuts down the production of another hormone. Okay, and for that, what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to add a page just gonna go blank here. And then we're gonna put it right there. So here, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you one particular negative feedback mechanism. And you guys, I gave you, if you have the booklet, or I'm gonna include it on here, there's a blank page. You can just include a blank page, or you can draw it little in the corner if you wanted. So let's say we're gonna do negative feedback for ADH. Now ADH, if you remember from Bio 20, is antidiuretic hormone. Antidiuretic hormone is a hormone that is released when you are dehydrated. So what it does is it takes water that is supposed to end up in your urine, it's supposed to end up in your toilet, and reabsorbs it back into the blood so that you're no longer dehydrated. Okay, so that's something that you would have done. It affects the nephrons of the kidneys, so you would have done this in Bio 20. Okay, so all of it, I want you to just to see this, and every single one of these negative feedbacks will start the same way, and that way is with the hypothalamus. Remember that that is your complaint box. So the hypothalamus hears that there's an issue. What is the issue? The issue is you're dehydrated. So that's a problem. You're either dehydrated, or another reason that your body might secrete ADH is if you have low blood pressure. So let's say that your blood pressure dropped. The hypothalamus hears about it. It's like, uh-oh, we have this problem. We have low blood pressure and dehydration. And so the hypothalamus then thinks, okay, this is not an emergency. It's not a life and death situation. So I don't need the nervous system to kick in. I can just deal with this with the endocrine system. And so what it does is it stimulates the pituitary gland, and the pituitary gland secretes ADH, antidiuretic hormone. And then antidiuretic hormone, when it's secreted in your blood, it has two effects. One effect is it causes your kidneys, the nephrons in the kidneys, but we're just going to say kidneys, to reabsorb more water. So reabsorption, remember, it's water moving from the nephrons out to go pee into the bloodstream, okay? So more water is reabsorbed into the blood, okay? So we're gonna write it on here. We're gonna say water from urine to blood, okay? And then the other effect that ADH has is it causes your blood vessel to constrict. So by doing that, by causing the kidneys to reabsorb more water, am I dehydrated still? My dehydration is gone. I've reabsorbed more water. So this message is being sent to saying that the problem has been fixed. And if the problem has been fixed, I can turn this pathway off. The hypothalamus is no longer receiving this message, and therefore the pituitary is no longer being stimulated, ADH is no longer being sent. Negative feedback. By constricting the blood vessels, my blood pressure increases. It's the same thing as putting a finger on the hose, right? When you put a finger on part of the hose, the pressure of the water increases. So by constricting the blood vessels, I'm doing the same thing. The hypothalamus is no longer receiving the message that my blood pressure is low, and therefore, again, there is no need for me to tell the pituitary to secrete ADH. So you can see how the negative feedback system, by solving the problem, what I've done is I've shut off the system that was trying to fix the problem. It's done. I don't need it anymore, okay? So that's what I wanted you to see sort of with a negative feedback system and how it works for that. We're going to be looking at some glands, and we're going to start labeling them as we go along. So what we're going to start with is we're going to start at the top, And so the very top, you can see here I have the pituitary gland. And right above the pituitary, we are going to have that hypothalamus, the complaint box, right? And over here, they don't have the hypothalamus labeled, but they do have the pituitary. So I'm gonna label that. And that's what we're gonna start with. We're gonna start with the hypothalamus pituitary, and as we go on into the other glands, we'll continue labeling this diagram, okay? So the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. So the hypothalamus, we said, is needed in order for us to know what happened there? What is going on inside the body. So we need the hypothalamus. So this is the center in the brain that is constantly kept informed about internal and external conditions I'm going to say body conditions and then not. Sort of frames the whole thing, okay? So it's constantly being kept informed, and then whenever there's an issue, it responds by either contacting the nervous system if I need the response to be quick but short lasting, or the endocrine system if I need the response to be slow but long lasting. Okay, so those are the decisions that are being made. Another thing that is important about the hypothalamus is it produces RHs. RHs are releasing hormones. And these releasing hormones are the way in which the hypothalamus communicates with the pituitary, okay? I'm gonna try and fit pituitary here. Okay, so that's how it communicates with the pituitary. And then we will see that the hypothalamus also produces its own hormones, which are oxytocin and ADH, but they're not released by the hypothalamus, they're released by the pituitary. So the hypothalamus makes them, but then stores them in the pituitary. And we'll talk about that in just a second, okay? So then I have the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland is the master gland. So this particular gland has an effect on most of the glands on your body. But remember that even though it's called the master gland, really the boss is the hypothalamus, because the pituitary only responds if the hypothalamus sends an RH releasing hormone telling the pituitary to do something, right? So it is, even though it's called the master gland, it is under the control of the hypothalamus. So really the hypothalamus is the big cheese. All right. Now when it comes to the pituitary, we're going to separate it into two. We have an anterior and a posterior pituitary. So when we draw this, so if we look at that structure right here, right? So if we look at this right there and we draw it, what we see is there is a front and a back. The front is the anterior and the back is the posterior, right? So if I divide this, this is the anterior and this is the posterior. pituitary. Okay, and we'll do the anterior first, and then we'll do the posterior after. Okay, and so when it comes to the anterior pituitary, it's going to release 4 tropic hormones. Remember, tropic hormones are the ones that have an effect on another gland. And it's going to release 3 non-tropic hormones. And I want to go with the non-tropic first. So it's going to release these 3 non-tropic hormones, and they are MSH, which you don't need to know. I'll put stars in the ones that you do need to know, or we'll highlight them. Prolactin and HGH, human growth hormone. So we'll give you some so these guys you need to know. MSH you don't need to know. Okay, so MSH, I'll just give you the information. I like you to have the information anyways. We'll put it in gray though. So MSH, this is melanocyte stimulating hormone. And by the way, with any of these guys that I'm giving you, where is our, oh, I have a lot of favorites here. Here is our data booklet for diploma. For any of these guys, if you look at the data booklet for the diploma, you can see that they have the abbreviations are on there, and you can find, so PRL, prolactin, is right on there. ADH, antidiuretic hormone, is right on there. So for these guys, you can see that all of the abbreviations are listed on there, so you don't need to memorize them. So melanocyte stimulating hormone, it stimulates the cells that are just right under your epidermis, called melanocytes, and they are the ones that give you a tan. So when they are stimulated, they release melanin, and melanin protects your body, your cells, against UV rays. Okay, so they produce melanin, which gives you a tan and protects against UVs. Okay, so UV rays. And your melanocytes will only release melanin for the first 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. So anything longer than that, your body is not tanning after that. After that, what you're doing is you're burning. So really your tanning sessions, or when you go outside in the sun, 10 to 15 minutes at the max is what you need, and then go back inside, give your melanocytes a chance to sort of shut off and sort of have a pause. And then if you go back outside, let's say a couple hours later, they will turn on again and release melanin again. If you have sort of prolonged exposure to UV, those melanocytes will stop producing melanin, and really what you're doing is you're burning your skin. Prolactin. So prolactin will have a direct effect again, and it'll have a direct effect on your mammary glands, and it's to produce breast milk. So this stands for prolactin. Oops. So it affects mammary glands. Those are the target cells to produce breast milk. Okay. And these don't kick in until later on in pregnancy. They don't kick in immediately, so not right when you get pregnant. And when we do reproduction and human development, we'll talk about when prolactin kicks in. Okay, and then human growth hormone. Usually the H is lowercase because you can have human, bovine, porcine, depending on where it comes from. Growth hormone, it could be from cows or pigs or humans. Human growth hormone, so this one, what it does is it causes bone and muscle cells to undergo mitosis, and therefore growth. Okay, and we'll give you a little bit more in the next page, and we'll talk about what happens when you have too little or too much of some of these hormones. Okay, so the 4 tropic hormones then. These 4 tropic hormones, the first one we've already mentioned once, TSH, which stands for thyroid stimulating hormone. And as we said before, it stimulates the thyroid. So it stimulates the thyroid to release its hormones. And we'll see next time on Wednesday what those hormones are. So that's TSH. And then the next one is ACTH. Again, you don't have to memorize these, but it stands for adrenocorticotropic it's all one word, hormone. And when we separate this hormone into the different parts of it, the name, so it's a tropic hormone. It stimulates another gland. What gland is that? It's the adrenal gland. What part of the adrenal gland? The cortex. We have the cortex, the outside, and the medulla, the inside. So we have a hormone that stimulates the adrenal cortex of the adrenal gland. Okay? And so what it does, again, it stimulates the cortex of the adrenal gland to release its hormones. Okay. And then the last 2 hormones are going to go together, and these guys are FSH and LH. So that's 3 and 4. And these are also known as gonadotropins. And we will see FSH stands for follicle stimulating hormone and LH stands for luteinizing hormone. And they stimulate the gonads. So the gonads are either the ovaries or testes, depending if you're male or female. Gonads is one of those words that sort of people have associated with male gonads, with the testes, but it's actually, we have them as well. It's the ovaries, okay? So they stimulate the gonads to secrete their hormones or to release their hormones. And we will see that there's estrogen and progesterone for females, there's testosterone for males. And so these are the hormones that are secreted by the anterior pituitary. So those are the ones that we need to, okay? And so thyroid stimulating hormone we saw, so they stimulate the thyroid. And to secrete its own hormones, and the thyroid secretes calcitonin and thyroxine. Adrenocorticotropic, so the adrenal cortex. And we will see the adrenal cortex is going to secrete cortisol. And as well, we're going to have some aldosterone on here. Human growth hormone, we've talked about the mitosis of bones and muscles. And so here what I want to do is I want to introduce what happens if you have too much of human growth hormone. So this is gigantism. So you have giants, okay? So gigantism, and this is if you have overproduction of HGH before puberty. So while you're having your growth spurt, this is when gigantism kicks in, okay? You can also have something called acromegaly Acromegaly, this is when you have too much HGH after puberty. So that's usually due to like a tumor of the pituitary. So if you have some sort of tumoral malfunction of the pituitary and all of a sudden it starts to secrete all of this human growth hormone after you've done your growing. And so here you see somebody who's sort of suffered from that. So this is the before and this is the after. And I should probably, because it sounds like A and B. So this is before and this is after. And what you see is sort of the jaw will spread your the bones of the eyebrows. So this particular bone increases, the bridge of your nose will increase, your neck will increase. Those are all things that, because the bones continue to grow after that, but they've already done all of their growing during puberty. And so that's what happens with acromegaly. Okay, so this is acromegaly. And then obviously then we have the opposite of too much, and that's too little, right? And so we have, in that case, we have dwarfism, okay? But with dwarfism, there's different kinds of dwarfism. There's the disproportionate dwarfism, which is usually due to something known as achondroplasia. Achondroplasia is a genetic disorder that affects chromosome number 4. And so because of that, what you have is disproportionate, meaning certain limbs, certain things are shorter or longer than other, disproportionate to the size of the head, for example. And so most dwarfs that you would see on television, for example, they would suffer from some form of achondroplasia, which is the genetic condition. Whereas proportionate dwarfism, also known as pituitary dwarfism, is due to HGH, so includes growth hormone deficiency, so growth hormone, human growth hormone. And so what you get here is individuals that are smaller than average. So usually individuals that are shorter than 4'10", they have sort of this delayed growth, delayed puberties. In some people, puberty doesn't happen at all. Then those ones are going to be called the proportionate dwarfs or have pituitary dwarfism. Okay, and so you obviously shorter stature. So pituitary dwarfism. Shorter stature. Whoops. And stunted growth and puberty. Oh, for crying out loud. Stunted growth and puberty. And a lot of the times, because the achondroplasia is a genetic disorder, usually it can come with all sorts of other congenital issues that you're born with, some of them with other malformations or issues with fertility, with mental capacity, whereas proportionate dwarfism is just about being short, okay? So that's the difference there. So you can see that there are different conditions to do that with that. Okay, prolactin we talked about. It stimulates production of breast milk. This is right before childbirth. And follicle stimulating hormone, we said this in females. What it does is it causes an egg to mature. In males, it causes sperm production. And it also causes the release of certain hormones, like, for example, estrogen. And here, testosterone. Okay. And then luteinizing hormone. In females, this one causes ovulation, which is the release of the egg from the ovary. And in males, it causes testosterone production. we'll get into detail with these guys later, not quite yet. And don't forget that these guys have a common name. They are the gonadotropins. Okay. And so that's going to end our lesson for today. And then on Wednesday, we'll continue with the posterior pituitary. We'll have a look at the thyroid and the adrenal glands and the pancreas and all of the other glands of the body. We will continue to sort of move down. And then hopefully we can finish by Wednesday. And if not, I've sort of reserved a little bit of time on Friday for us to finish the endocrine system. So I hope this helped. I'm going to post the video and the notes for you guys. Don't forget that you also have a Google Meet tomorrow so that you can ask any questions on this or on the assignment that is going to be due on Wednesday. And I will be seeing you guys tomorrow. Bye-bye.